How did you end up doing this?
Yeah, same as everybody else. I burnt out terribly, and I was really confused by it because I burnt out doing something that I really loved. My background is Chinese medicine.
Okay.
So I have a master's degree in Chinese medicine, which is acupuncture, herbs, lifestyle changes, nutrition, tai chi, qigong, all sorts of things, all the things. And I practiced for 15 years. I burnt out probably about 8 years in and didn't realize for about 6 years.
This was a killer episode. I had the one and only Kate Donovan. She has the #1 burnout podcast, Fried, the Burnout Show. She is a massive keynote speaker. She is dialed into this way better than most of the people I know, and she has a unique approach that we all need to hear to hopefully prevent burnout, and then if not, how to recover. Do more by doing less. With me, Charles Alexander, for small business owners, startups, and busy folks. How do you get into burnout prevention and recovery? There's not a program for that.
No, well, there will be.
There is. There is.
Dun, dun, dun. There will be, but no, there isn't just yet. And you get into it. Most everybody got into it because they went through it and didn't find the resources they needed. And so right now we are a bunch of singular lifeboats floating around.
Singular lifeboats floating around
with our own set of resources. Yeah. And there hasn't really been a time where enough of us came together and said, okay, this is the way through. Everybody's like, my way through is the way through, at the moment.
How did you end up doing this?
Yeah, same as everybody else. I burnt out terribly, and I was really confused by it because I burnt out doing something that I really loved. My background is Chinese medicine.
Okay.
So I have a master's degree in Chinese medicine, which is acupuncture, herbs, lifestyle changes, nutrition, tai chi, qigong, all sorts of things.
All the things.
All the things. And I practiced for 15 years. I burnt out probably about 8 years in and didn't realize for about 6 years.
Wow. So yeah, that's really interesting because you're doing like the thing that you're doing the fun. And let me back up. I'm in the buckle of the Bible about the fun, what we call the woo-woo stuff. You're doing all the things that are supposed to not get you there. Yeah. And it got you there in, it sounds like a short period of time. How'd that happen?
That happened when you really break it down into like the smallest building blocks. There's a couple. One of them is childhood trauma that led me to, and not like massive crazy things that happened to me, but little T things, little T trauma that happened throughout my childhood that led me to believe that I wasn't successful unless I was making mass amounts of money, that I had to do everything by myself, and that I didn't have enough value or worth as a person. So when I was serving people and getting paid for it, I had to overserve and overgive and overdo and over everything.
Right. So I've listened to your podcast, by the way, great podcast.
Thank you.
Good plug for Fried the Burnout podcast for anybody watching, listening. I've seen that enough where everybody else, when we're talking about burnout, and I've been guilty of this too, like, well, here's what you do. And you sit down and you get a gratitude journal. Look, I'm not mocking a gratitude journal because if you're thankful for stuff, then great. But man, I do love the fact that you zig while everybody else zag. What you say to go the opposite in order to come up with this. And I guess this kind of goes back to what you're just talking about in terms of trauma or anything else. You look for resentment first?
I look for resentment first. Resentment every single time. When you look at it, pay attention to it, dig into it, look at it objectively in your world, you'll find that it tells you two things. One of the things it tells you is everywhere your boundaries are being broken, either by you or by other people, most of the time by you, by the way.
Yeah.
And the other thing that it'll teach you is every single place where you've chosen self-neglect and self-abandonment over self-care.
So in looking at boundaries being broken, and that is a big issue. So a lot of the folks that listen, watch, they're entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
They could
we
be.
We suck at this.
Dude. Yes. Me included. So
yeah, me too.
So yeah, just assume all the questions I'm asking. And when I say I'm asking for a friend, it's just me, dude.
Mm-hmm. You're the friend.
But a lot of them are, small operators. They could be solopreneurs, or they could be a little larger with a handful of employees. And they're all kind of in a service-based advisory role. And a lot of them have, maybe they're not full on burnout, but that's part of the reason they listen or watch this is to figure out how to do more by doing less. They want to they want to reduce some of that. And a lot of the things I like to talk about are boundaries. Now, granted, I don't have the background in it that you do. So I want you to be the grown up in the room talking about boundaries real quick. First and foremost, you mentioned like two sets of boundaries. One of them is the one you set for other people, and one of them is the one you set for yourself. Dealer's choice, which one you want to start with there for me?
Internal boundaries first, always.
Okay. Yay. Internal boundaries.
I don't believe that people can set proper, successful external boundaries if their internal boundaries are not well managed. Because if you're not holding yourself to a standard, you're never going to hold anybody else to a standard either.
Give me an example of internal.
An internal boundary might be something like, most of the time, this is the mother in the household. Not always, but most of the time.
No, I agree.
Somebody in your family opens the fridge and says, I'm hungry. And before they say there's nothing to eat, before they say anything else,
yep,
you are already listing, well, there's leftover fried rice. There's some ribs in there. If you look in the drawer, there's berries and that you can mix with some, cheese and hummus. And then there's this and there's that. And if you look in the freezer, there's some lasagna from last week. And you're listing out all of these options for people who have eyes.
Right.
When you have small children, of course, this is a different situation, right? You have to feed your kids before they can do it themselves. But you were saying earlier, you have kids that are quite a bit older. That's you don't need to teach a 15-year-old how to look in the refrigerator.
No.
So internal boundaries is not overstepping into someone else's space, solving problems that they can solve for themselves. Boom. That's part of it. So every time you feel like you are automatically stepping into a situation because you're being helpful, because you're being kind, because you're oftentimes what's really happening is that you're feeling like you have to solve a problem in order to be loved. And you're taking away that person's opportunity to have their own agency and to have their own growth.
When we see entrepreneurs do this, and this is a discussion point we have quite a bit, is that it happens for a wide variety of reasons. First and foremost, we like helping, right? So we're trying to constantly get in the middle of it and point and tell and do.
Yeah.
And not to mention, we also like the authority of it. We like to be the center of attention. And a lot of entrepreneurs, and I've done this myself, build your business in such a way that everything has to go through me. And I'm guessing secretly that's because I like to be the smartest guy in the room. And then lastly, I don't know. I always see that people do that it seems like fear. And I don't know if that's the right term or not.
It is. Because trusting other people with your baby is hard.
Yeah.
You don't just take any babysitter off the street.
That's
go to your community, you go to your church, you go to wherever it is you go to get people that you trust, to find people that you trust to be in your home with your children. Your business is not very different, honestly.
And I'm glad you said it. And I've tried to mention the same things, but I'm a dude that's 48 years old at this point. So I always seem like Tom Cruise when he's tiptoeing over laser beams trying to steal the Hope Diamond I don't want to get accused of mansplaining, but look, I'm married to a mamapreneur. So I can see, that side of it at the house, because moms especially are, I don't know, they are kind of put upon, their kids will do it, or their parents or the in-laws, or even female entrepreneurs, especially new entrepreneurs I see, are the ones that get hit on's way wrong term, but they're the ones that get offered the most opportunity at the Chamber of Commerce. Hey, Kate, come on in and you
for free.
You're going to be our new secretary. Oh, we just know you're going to love doing it. Well, don't you want to serve on the board of the blah, blah, blah? And don't you need to come to this next networking meeting? And they just power all on top of them. So all of that to say, the internal boundaries have to be set first.
Yes. All that to say is like, you don't volunteer to bring the cupcakes if you don't want to bring the cupcakes every time. And so when you don't know where your internal boundaries have been crossed, that's when you look for resentment. And you find it in places where you're like, I really am annoyed that I have to bake these cupcakes. Right. Well, how often are you baking the cupcakes? Why are you baking the cupcakes? Did you decide 5 years ago to bake the cupcakes and then you just kept to the roll because you never gave it away? Is it time to give it away? Like, what needs to happen here? Yeah. Or you might have been voluntold to do something that happens, but oftentimes we are volunteering ourselves for all of these extra things that are not actually adding a ton of value to our worlds. Or Maybe they did add a ton of value for a little while, but we held on to it a little bit too long.
Yes.
And sometimes it's because of that sacrifice and martyrdom and everything through me
yeah.
sort of idea sometimes. And sometimes it's because we never stopped to look. Like when you're building a business, this is my 4th business that I've built, the one that I'm working in now. And so I've done this a few times, and I've done it in various countries and various languages. So I've gone through all sorts of difficulties while building a business.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're building a business, what happens is you wear all the hats because you have to get started. So your marketing and your sales and your service and your product development, your everything.
Sure.
And as you go, you don't stop to look back and analyze what's still useful and what's not. I would promise you that if you haven't stopped to take stock,
Right.
20% of the things you're doing are useless to your business. And you could literally stop doing them today and your bottom line would not change at all. Your job is to use resentment to find those 20%.
How do I use resentment to find the bottom 20% of the things
Number 1, you notice it. You have to admit that you have it, right? So number 1 is awareness and noticing. Number 2 is cold assessment of the situation. What's really going on here? Oh, and if you start hearing yourself say, but I have to do this because if I don't, I'm going to feel guilty. No. We choose guilt over resentment every time. Guilt goes quick. Resentment lasts forever.
Oh, okay.
So we're looking and saying, what is really going on here? Does this thing need to be done at all? Question number 1.
Sure.
Question number 2 is because if it doesn't need to be done, we're done with the questions. Just chop the thing off and be done with it. If it does need to be done, question number 2 is, do I need to do it? If you don't need to do it, then it gets delegated.
Right.
Or outsourced or given to some sort of software or something.
Sure. Automated.
Some way, shape, or form, right? Question number 3 is, if it needs to be done and I need to do it, do I have the best possible software or tool that I need in order to make it easy? And this is everything from, do you have a pan in the morning that your eggs don't stick to are you paying for the right CRM software that really suits your needs?
Ooh.
And everything in between.
Right. Am I opening a tool that makes me angry when I look at it?
Every single time.
Yeah.
That's resentment.
All right.
And the last question is, if none of these are true, what is the boundary that's being broken? And am I breaking it? Or is someone else overstepping?
So does it need to be done?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have the best tool?
Mm-hmm.
And if none of these are true, what?
What boundary is being crossed? And am I the one crossing it?
Got you.
Or is someone else overstepping?
Do you have, put you on the spot, like a commonly, is there a common bottom 20% of things that I'm doing that a lot of folks are doing that that probably fit this category that I should be delegating or eliminating?
The thing about this is that it's different for everybody because we all have different strengths and desires.
Sure.
So for some people, every time they open Canva to design something to throw on their social media, they're banging their head against a wall.
Oh,
well, there you go. There's the thing that needs to be outsourced. Get rid of it. Pay somebody $10 an hour to do it somewhere in the world. Pay somebody $35 an hour if you are convinced that you need to have somebody in the US. I pay my VA $35 an hour, and I love it.
Yeah.
I love it because she takes things off my plate that I really don't want to do. One of the things that built up for me over time was podcast post-production. It was taking me 6 to 8 hours once a week to go through the episode, do all the editing, get the video, do the show notes. Now it's a lot faster because there's AI and there's all sorts of other tools. 5 years ago, these things weren't being used the way they are today. But I realized I was 3 years in, I was starting another degree. So I knew something had to come off my plate. I needed to create time for studying and writing papers and other things. And I looked at the things that I was most annoyed by. And I thought, this podcast production is eating me alive. This is the thing that needs to get outsourced. I have all the best tools and it's not enough. So this needs to be sent to somebody. I need to be okay with paying for this. because once this gets off my plate, I eliminate not only tasks that I don't want to do, but the emotional strain that comes with doing those tasks.
So once you start to go through this bottom 20%, we're eliminating, delegating, not getting into boundaries. I feel like we got to go. I need to take a step back here. So we were talking about internal boundaries because that's usually not the one people think about. What about external boundaries?
External boundaries, I find, are very rarely pushed, honestly. Most of the stuff is our own internal stuff. And a lot of that is that we didn't speak up when somebody asked us to do something or something like that. When our external boundaries are being crossed, we have to really look at, are we dealing with a bully? Or are we not being clear about expectations from our side? Or did we leave the front door to our house unlocked and then got mad when somebody walked in?
Sure.
So we have to really look at the situation and figure out what's actually going on here. And when it comes to setting an external boundary, so say you have a client that's emailing you every day at 7:30 p.m. and you're answering the emails. Well, your problem is, first of all, that you're answering the emails.
100%.
Right. But if that client then emails you 5 times if you don't answer the emails, then you have to set up an external boundary that says this is not the way we're going to work. And you can do that in a few ways. The first thing we need to understand is that there's a difference between stating a boundary and making a request. The boundary is what you will do if they don't honor a request that you make. So really, technically, people can't really step over your boundaries unless you don't hold up your end of the bargain. So if you make a request that says, please only email me within business hours, and then you answer after business hours, that's on you.
100%.
So your boundary is, I am not going to respond to emails after 6 p.m. If you need to make that easier for yourself, you can set up an auto responder every single day at 6 o'clock.
100%.
That says, hey, thanks, got your email. I'll respond to it after 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, more likely around 11 when I get through most of my inbox. You can write whatever you want.
Yep. I've worked with people to set up autoresponders for, and I know this is annoying, but for every email that you get, to train people that says, if you are a client of mine, I'll get back to you within 24 hours. If this is an inquiry, I'll get back to you within 48 hours. If the world is on fire, you probably know how to get a hold of me. And if you don't, that means the world's not on fire.
Exactly.
So that's part of the external boundaries. And
that's part of the external boundaries, right? It's making the request and knowing what your response will be if that request is not honored.
And where do you think you see a lot of entrepreneurs getting this wrong with external boundaries?
One, we've been told to, undersell and overdeliver. Right?
Right.
And sometimes we're doing that a little bit too much. Sometimes we're overselling. We're over-promising things that we can't actually deliver within the time frame that the customer wants it, but we're trying to make it work because we really needed the client.
Yeah.
Right? Like we were scrapped for money. We needed to take something in and we said, sure, I can get that done, instead of being really honest about what our capacity was. So that happens a lot. Sometimes it's about taking on the wrong client. This is another thing that resentment will point you to. You'll find like, oh, this client, and this client, every time they email me, as soon as I see their name pop up in my inbox, I roll my eyes. Yeah. Well, why? Because they're asking you to do a task that you don't actually want to do. You decided that you do it for them as an extra service because you were trying to be nice, but you hate it every single time.
Sure.
So you're ruining your relationship with your client because your attitude and your energy has changed. And every time they contact you, you're like, this one again.
Yeah.
Right. Those things need to shift.
So that's internal boundaries, external boundaries. I've heard you say this, and say this, you got a book. What is the bounce back ability factor?
The bounce back ability factor to me is what determines whether or not we are totally burnt out or not. So bounce back ability is a combination of resilience, grit, trust, and surrender. And it is those combination of factors that give us the agility and flexibility we need to respond to life as it happens, so that we're not so thrown off course by the smallest little thing. That if I grew up a gymnast, right? So we have a balance beam, and that balance beam is 4 inches wide. And if you get knocked off from the side, you are falling. Like, it's not likely that you'll stand back up. A lot of people are living, especially entrepreneurs, have taken on so much that a feather could knock them off balance.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really hard for them to get back up. So bounce back ability is giving yourself, instead of a 4-inch beam to stand on, is giving yourself 6 feet of space to walk between. And you sort of wander through the middle most of the time. And if you get whacked from the left, you go over to the right a little, but then you just come right back through the middle because you have space, you have flexibility, you have agility.
There's margin there's room for error. There's room for, I'm gonna rant for a second. So some of the people that I work with, and part of the reason that I've got the Time Freedom Group and creating your 4-day work week is because if you look at their calendar, and it's like pulled over from our old corporate calendars from back in the day. It's every 15 minutes. And every time I have a free space, I shove something in there. We're just busy, busy, busy all day long. We get to the end of the day, we don't know what we did. And then worse yet, then we have an actual, a new client or a real emergency, or like everybody watching or listening, especially if you're watching, you can tell I'm halfway sitting in the dark. Doesn't sound as good as I normally do because I had a little bit of a hiccup in an emergency because I have a microphone that decided to take off early. I guess it got a little, it went to happy hour and got too carried away, and now I'm using the backup. Great, glad it's here, but I had the margin in my day in this space to be able to do it and not completely flip out. Most folks don't do that. They go wire to wire, and especially if you've got family at home, it's a bad habit, and it's not helping anybody else. It's just hurting you.
Well, it's hurting your family too, because by the time you finish your day, you then need a buffer from your day to get back into your life, and you don't have it. You walk out of that recording room and your kids are like, right in your face.
Yeah.
Right. Which they are supposed to do.
They don't know you're pissed off. They don't know that you're angry at the microphone or the person that emailed you, and they walk straight in and they say, what do we have to eat? What's in the refrigerator?
Exactly.
Start telling them about the lasagna in the freezer, and then we're all frustrated.
Exactly. So this example of the schedule is really a perfect one, because one of the things that we need in burnout recovery is white space. You need to have white space in your calendar because you're going to get thrown off of things sometimes, and you need time to readjust. If you don't have white space in your calendar, my questions for you are, first of all, A, why not? Do you know? And B, do you feel like you are allowed to earn money if you aren't abandoning yourself and neglecting yourself for your work?
Ooh, that's a quote. So and you just saying that, and I know we're getting really close to time here, that the way you were just talking about burnout recovery, and then that reminds me, I've heard you also say there's a difference between burnout prevention and recovery. What's the difference?
Burnout prevention is stress management. Okay. That's it. They are the same exact thing. When you are already burnt out, there are brain changes. So parts of your brain go into hypertrophy, so they grow. Parts of your brain go into hypotrophy, so they shrink. Your gut microbiome changes for the worse. So you have more bad bacteria and less good bacteria. You have muscle atrophy. There's all sorts of things happening in all different systems in your body. You actually need more rest, more support. Sometimes that means nutritional support. Sometimes that means actual bolstering in life. Like you need that white space in between things as a bolster for your world. The tools that you'll need to recover from that space are gratitude is not real useful there. Like you were saying before, like gratitude, but when you're just doing stress management work beforehand is great. And if you can write a gratitude journal and you feel the sensation of gratitude in your body, super useful tool. When you're burnt out, you are unlikely to be able to engage with that emotion. You'll be like my stupid gratitude journal. You'll be like this stupid thing that I'm writing down. And then you'll be like, I have like a beautiful family and a wonderful job and I have great friends and I don't feel gratitude for any. And now I feel worse about myself. And now I feel guilty. And now I feel right. So you're going through this whole thing in your head. Meanwhile, this practice is not bringing you anything because the associated neurochemicals with gratitude are not very accessible to you at the moment when you're burnt out. So by instead being honest about where we are and using resentment to prune away some of the things we don't like, to create more space to figure out where we want to go next, to understand what kind of clients we want to work with, what kind of prices we want to charge. My prices are led by resentment.
Ooh.
How much do I need to get paid in order to be as generous as possible without feeling resentment and while maintaining my integrity?
That's a great way to price.
Right. That's how I price, because when I get paid, if I'm upset and then I keynote for 1,000 people and that's the energy I bring to your stage is resentment, that doesn't play well.
Nope.
So when we can't use, like, gratitude is great for burnout prevention, but not great for burnout recovery, right? So these things have to be separated and pulled apart. That's the fastest way I can explain it.
Kate, that's a lot of great info in a short period of time. I could talk for another 2 hours. You're good at creating white space, so you don't have another 2 hours. But I always end with this softball question that's not so much a softball, but what is something right now that Kate Donovan should be doing less of?
The first thing, the biggest thing that's taking up the most of my time right now is wondering whether or not I'm making it.
Oh, you're already here.
I know. That's why it's a waste.
So if you quit thinking about that, worrying about that, what will that let you do more of?
Have more creative space for writing.
Awesome. And we need you to write more. Kate, how can somebody find you?
Fried the Burnout podcast is the best place to find me. From there are all the links and all the connections and all the things.
All the stuff, all the things, folks. That's a great place to look. Kate, thank you so much for your patience and coming on here to hang out with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
If you're an entrepreneur, solopreneur, advisor, agent, or freelancer, listen up. You'd rather do what you love, spend more time with family, friends, traveling, exercise, sleep. Have the time to do what you want instead of putting out fires, fighting never-ending to-do lists, checking email at 9 p.m., then go to yourcharlesalexander.com. I've created the toolkit you need with all the bells and whistles to help you streamline your workflow without sacrificing your income. Just go to yourcharlesalexander.com, scroll to the bottom, grab the exclusive toolkit, and start seeing results right away and take the first step toward a more balanced work life. And as always, if you don't, an angel may actually lose its wings. True story. Have a great day.